Welcome to this slightly unusual video on my channel. Before we start, I'm not sponsored, I'm not a mechanic, I'm not a test rider, and this is just the early impressions of these shocks. In the beginning of the video, the rear shock is standard, just so you know. When we disassembled the front forks, we noticed that both fork legs were set to rebound damping. That meant I had no compression damping at all, and the forks only contained about 50% of the specified oil. Not good at all. I'd like to apologize for the odd camera setup in these videos. Attempting to film vibration isn't easy. You either get too much stabilization or too little. I hope I have managed to get the message across and that you survive the odd camera work. I'm now going to show you a side-by-side comparison between the standard suspension and the Öhlins suspension. I did a test loop and I could immediately feel that the Öhlins forks were so much better. There's many places where I've previously been very afraid of bottoming out the forks. With the Öhlins forks installed, this was immediately gone. The confidence on tarmac was also vastly improved. Keep in mind, I'm riding on knobblies, so not the best suited rubber on tarmac. Comparing the two fork setups here going uphill, with the original forks it feels vague and you feel like you need to be afraid. With the Öhlins you feel in control, the suspension feels firm and it feels nice. Going down this hill on the standard forks, I've always had to limit the speed because I've just been afraid of a big bang when I've hit the bottom there. Then adding a bit of speed here, and then I need to slow down for this corner. And with the standard forks, whoa, that was a lot of dive there. Again, very close to bottoming the forks out. Not very nice at all. Now then, if we compare this to the Öhlins suspension, this is the first time I'm riding here and there's no problem. This is just so much nicer. Yes, the bike is vibrating and jumping around, but it feels like the suspension is telling you what it's doing. In another section, here I'm picking up a little bit of speed. It's a little bit narrow, but once you clear this corner, you can open up a little bit. And there's a few ruts and the rain changes it, and bang! Oh dear. Yes, I knew about that, but I did not know it was going to knock the camera out of alignment. So here we go again on the Öhlins suspension, going around the corner and nothing. Everything's fine. Looking in slow motion, yeah, the camera actually was knocked out of position and the Öhlins has no problems. This section here I want to show because it contains a lot of boulders and rocks and little things here that make it really annoying even on a big bike. Looking at the Öhlins suspension, it's not a problem. Obviously, rocks are annoying anyway. On the tarmac here, we can see coming into a corner, there's a huge amount of dive. Now, I didn't obviously know that I was without any compression damping, but yeah, that's a lot of dive for not much speed. With the Öhlins suspension coming into the corner, yeah, everything's under control, everything feels fine, and let's keep going. And then the rear shocks arrived. They are really easy to install. On our bikes we had to take the right hand side fairings off and remove the rear wheel cowl and then install the shock, and then we need to set it up. And this is where things get a little bit trickier. I'm going to repeat the disclaimer here. I'm no expert at this. I do not know anything about setting up shocks apart from roughly what I'm going to tell you in this video. When we got the shocks, both me and Cass found that they were quite soft and squidgy. Before we actually went out riding, we set the sag on the bike. The manual says to set the sag to 25 to 35 millimeters. That meant adding quite a lot of preload to the spring. However, I think we got it pretty much okay. We could probably use a little bit more preload and thus a little bit less sag. However, the first impressions on the road, we felt that the bike was very bouncy and very wallowy. We didn't like it at all. So since then we have tinkered with the suspension a bit. We have added quite a lot of compression and quite a lot of rebound damping. I'm not going to say what we have currently as a setting because A, it's gonna probably change, and B, you should set the bike up for yourself, not as we have set it up. And C, both of us are not very petite either. Personally, I have a tuned mass damper around my waist. It's supposed to keep me stable when I'm bouncing around off-road on the bikes. When it comes to dialing in the suspension, you should first figure out what it is that you like, what you want, and what you're going to use the bike for. Personally, I do not like super stiff suspension. I feel I lose the control and the feedback from the road. The feedback from the road and the confidence in the bike is the primary things I'm looking for. When it comes to the Grom, we have to be realistic about what the bike actually is. Small wheels, short wheelbase, and very little power. This means that expecting MotoGP or some form of supermoto race bike suspension is not going to happen. I want this bike to be leisurely to ride on a straight line, I want it to be fun and engaging to ride in the corner, and I want it to have a little bit of extra confidence when bouncing around off-road. What I therefore would like to feel is a suspension that works as a suspension, not as a steel rod, and a suspension that doesn't wallow up and down when going into corners, coming out of corners. And I don't want it to be some form of air mattress either. I want it to tell me what's going on. Now there's a few characteristics that's immediately identifiable to the shock setup. The first one is that if the bike feels like when you are going into a little dip or a little rut or jump, and when you come out of it, the bike wants to send you skywards just like a pogo stick. If that's the case, you have too little rebound damping. It basically means that the shock cannot stop the energy in the spring from sending you skywards. Another one is that if it feels like you're hitting a little bump in the road, a seam on the tarmac, and the bike wants to send you skywards when you hit that, then that is too much compression damping. The energy is basically just straight transferred into the frame and the whole bike rather than being absorbed by the actual shock and the damper. If you have too little compression damping, you'll feel it when going into a corner and the bike kind of just wants to sag into the corner. And if you combine that with too little rebound damping, then you have this wallowy, pogo-y feeling when you are going around a corner. Too much rebound damping manifests itself in a few ways. One is that you hit a bump and the bike just swallows it up and doesn't rise back up to its normal suspension level. Another one is that the rear, in this case, seems to lose grip because when you go into a corner, the spring doesn't have enough force to push the wheel back into the tarmac, and thus you lose grip. And usually on a road bike with street tires, this manifests itself as the rear chewing itself up. The rear tire has got weird patterns on it and so forth. So a little bit more difficult to pinpoint. If you want to learn more about suspension setup, there's tons of good resources on the internet and YouTube, so go watch those. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm saying. There's one thing though that I'd like to point out. There is no point in investing money in something as nice as the Öhlins suspension if you're not going to take the time to actually do the adjustments. So if you have an interest in this, the Öhlins is a good option for you. If you just want a better shock, you might as well go buy one that doesn't have any adjustments and is set up for the generic population. Now back to our bikes. After a bit of setup, we're starting to get very comfortable with these bikes. The confidence is very high. The only problem I'm having is that I'm riding knobblies and tarmac, but that's a self-inflicted problem. The way the forks keep the bike in the corner is astonishing for such a small bike with small wheels. This bike shouldn't be able to take corners in the way that it does. The rear is about there when it comes to our setup at the moment. We want to tinker a little bit more, and we probably will never stop tinkering. That's kind of the point of having an adjustable suspension. I hope you can see from the footage how much fun these bikes are to ride. They were fun before, but the suspension has really transformed the bikes. I think this is one of the best investments you can do. If you have standard suspension on your Grom, change it for something. Anything is better than the standard mass manufactured cheapskate suspension. If you want the best, I think you should fork out for the Öhlins. They are the best, and they do have a resale value too, so if you sell the bike you can take the parts off and sell it to someone else who wants it. Enjoy the last bit of the footage here, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope this has been useful.